Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today is our first webinar of the month of April 2016. And today, a very special time of year. We just had leadership team transition for a lot of regions around the world, and that means that we have new presidents and vice presidents and secretary treasurers in place and visitor hosts and education coordinators. So what today's webinar is designed to do is to really supplement your training that you've already been through on a regional level and kind of review some of the things in BNI Connect that you'll be doing in your various positions in order to kind of do your jobs throughout the next 6 months or 12 months, depending on how long the term is. Now, that being said, many different regions do things many different ways. So when I'm talking about a lot of the things here in BNI Connect, I'm going to be relatively general about them. And again, the reason for that is that different regions have some slightly different processes. Just to give you one example, in probably about 80 to 90% of the regions around the world, the vice president is the one that enters the POMS report on a weekly basis after your BNI meeting. So the vice president would collect the slips or go back and verify all of the online slips and then enter the POMS report, take attendance and stuff like that for the week. Now, in some regions, I know of a couple of regions that they have delegated that responsibility out to somebody to help the vice president out, and they keep the track of the numbers and do the POMS report on a weekly basis. So as I'm going through things today, I may say, typically the secretary treasurer does this, but in your region, if you happen to be, let's say, a visitor host and you've been trained to do this, then by all means follow that training. The process in BNI Connect will stay the same regardless of who's accessing it. So the screens will look the same, the buttons are going to be the same, regardless of what position you're actually in doing this. Now, the other thing is that when it comes to permissions, now that you guys are in position, you should have the permissions to do these things for your various roles. If you don't panic. Just contact your director consultant, your regional office, your executive director and say, hey, I tried to do this, but I don't have the link to do that. A lot of times it's because you haven't yet been assigned to the position for whatever reason. As soon as they make the assignment, then you should be all set. And if not, they can definitely submit a support ticket and we will be happy to help them out. Finally, when it comes to permissions, a lot of times the president, the vice president, the secretary treasurer, by default all have the same permissions. So for example, go back to entering the POMS report. Even though it's primarily and usually the vice president that's going to go in and do things like that, again, generally speaking, the president and the secretary treasurer also have permission to go in and edit or update the POMS report. And we do this a lot of times because it allows you to back each other up. As a leadership team, it's great to work together and also not get behind on stuff. So, for example, if the vice president is out on vacation, for 2 or 3 weeks, there's no reason to let all the statistics go stale. The president or the secretary treasurer can jump in and take care of that. All right, so that being said, just a couple of other quick housekeeping things. This is a live webinar, so if you have any questions whatsoever as we're going through the material today, please feel free to ask those questions. The best way to do that is to type your question in. Eric has already typed in a question that I'll get to in just a couple of seconds. But just type it in, I see it pop up on my screen, and I will be happy to answer that question either immediately or while we're going through that particular piece. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to stack them in there now, and when we get to that function, I will answer that particular question. Or if it's completely and totally unrelated, we'll just talk about it at the end of today's webinar. We're scheduled for about an hour's worth of content. Sometimes this webinar goes 45 minutes, sometimes this particular webinar goes an hour and a half, and it really is going to depend on how many questions you guys have. But rest assured, I am happy to stay on this webinar until every single question is answered. I have blocked off the rest of my afternoon for you guys, so feel free to ask questions. I realize that a lot of you have other things to do besides this, so I will try to keep the content portion of it as close to under an hour as possible. That being said, if you have to leave right away or you get an important client call or whatever, you have another appointment, don't worry, I will be recording today's session. I'm going to make it available in 2 places. It'll be available on the support site, so you can get to the support site by clicking on this question mark here in the upper right-hand corner. When you click on that question mark, it'll take you to the support site. You'll see all of our upcoming webinars and the links to the recordings as well. You can also go directly to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. Again, that's youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. This has our entire library of webinars and short videos and education moments and all sorts of things about BNI Connect, even some special announcements from Dr. Meisner. And so when you have a chance, check it out. This is where today's webinar will be uploaded as well. I usually get them up there within about 48 hours of the presentation. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me see. We have a couple of questions. Eric says, can you alphabetize the list for POMs to both the first and last names? Our list is not alphabetized, making POMs entry really difficult. We're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes. POMs is one of the first things that I'm going to cover today, so we will take a look at that. I'll leave your question there so I remind myself when we get to that part. And Ruth said, is thank you for closed business given entered against the member who receives or the member that gave the business? Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to answer that right now as we're going to go through some of the stats. Now, one of the things that you'll get asked a lot about being in a leadership team position, especially if you're the vice president, is these stats on the home screen. So this is the home screen of BNI Connect, and this is the My BNI Business Report. Now, every member has access to this report, so all they need to do is log into BNI Connect, and they will see this right in front of them. That's great news, by the way. When I first became a member, by the way, I am a member. I've been a member since 2002, so I've held just about every leadership team position there is. And I can tell you that when the first 10 years of me being a member, we didn't have a BNI Connect. So that means that if I wanted to see my stats, I had to beg my vice president, please, please, please bring a report in so that I can see how I'm doing, see how many referrals I passed, and so on and so forth. Now we have access to that 24/7, 365. These numbers here on the top of the screen, this My BNI Business, it's important to know that those numbers are a direct reflection of the POMS report. So a lot of chapters have gone completely paperless. So they just use the online referrals and the online one-to-one slips and everything else. Regardless of whether you're all digital or still using the paper slips at the chapter meeting, these numbers should be accurate, and they're accurate based on the POMS reports. So after the weekly meeting and after the POMS reports have been submitted, that is when these numbers here will change. The only one of these numbers that is not driven by the POMS report is this very top number that says revenue received to my business. That is how much money I've made as a member in BNI. Now, to answer your question, Ruth, when we're submitting a thank you for closed business slip, so let's say that I submit a thank you for closed business slip here. So it was a referral that I received from, let's say, Frank in my chapter or something like that, that had turned into business. So let's say that Frank had given me a referral that ended up turning into $1,000 in business to my business. When I submit this slip, that $1,000 gets credited to Frank in the POMS report as the person that generated the business. However, now and this is only available if you're using the online slips, we'll start to track those. We'll track all of the thank you for closed business slips and basically keep a running total of how much revenue you've received to your business. Now, this number is completely and totally private to the members. Nobody else can see that number. I know it drives a lot of leadership teams crazy that they can't see how much money their members are making, but that is private information. Even myself with godlike access to BNI Connect, I can't look at anybody else's thank you for closed business numbers, just how much money they've generated for other people. Okay, now, once in a while, some people may come to you and say, hey, those numbers, they're just not right. They're not adding up. So the first thing to look at is make sure that the POMS report has been submitted for next week. But if not, there's a really useful report on this homepage called the My Personal Participation Report. If you can get the member to print out a copy of this, this is the last year's worth of data for their particular account. So it goes through line by line by line, week by week by week, and shows exactly what was entered into the POMS report for them. And for those of you that don't know what these all stand for, I'm just going to go through them real quick. POMS is really, it started out as the attendance report: present, absent, late, medical, substitute, PALMS, present, absent, late, medical, substitute. Then you have RG and RR. RG stands for referrals given. RR stands for referrals received. Now there's two different types of referrals that we track in BNI, and that is an outside referral or an inside referral. So RGI is referrals given inside, RGO is referrals given outside. And an inside referral is when two members do business with each other. So if I needed an architect for redesigning my house, and I went to the architect in my chapter and he redesigned my house, that would be an inside referral. Now, if my parents are downsizing and they're moving into a smaller house and they need some work done on that house and they need to have that house redesigned, and I introduce Frank to my parents as a new client for him, then that would be an outside referral. So an inside referral, two members doing business with each other. Outside referral, pretty much when you introduce anybody else in the world to somebody in your chapter. That would be an outside referral. V stands for visitors. One-to-ones are obviously one-to-one meetings. TYFCB is the thank you for closed business, and CEUs are chapter education units, such as today's webinar. Make sure you give yourself a credit for today's webinar. So it's easy for them to find out and look through this list and see, oh, well, here's where the mistake was. One of the most common mistakes is that a thank you for closed business accidentally gets entered manually into either the one-to-one column or the CEU column. So all of a sudden the member looks like they have, 17,000 CEUs or 17,000 one-to-ones, and it's really just a thank you for closed business that was entered into the wrong column. So I'll show their sponsors and their trainings that they've attended. That's also a great report, by the way, for membership committees when you have to review the membership when somebody's coming up for renewal. So this is the home page in BNI Connect. Does anybody have any quick questions on the home page? Ruth, I think I answered your question on this, but before we move on and go a little bit deeper into the system. All right, so Ruth says yes, she's all set with that. All right, any other questions about really the home page, the My BNI Business, or about the online slips? I'm not going deep into online slips because I do a whole webinar on online slips. You're welcome to join me for that webinar. It's going to be coming up in about a week. It's going to be next Tuesday, April 12th. Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to be this Thursday. My mistake. This Thursday, April 7th, at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go deep into the referral tracking process. So, all right. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to move on to the next part of this. Now, the next part of this, the home page is all about you as a member. To get to some of the other tools, we are going to have to venture into that scary place beyond the home screen. And for that, we're going to have to dive into some of the menus along the top. Now you'll see up here in the red bar we have a number of menus. Now depending on, again, your level of access, you may or may not see all of them, but they are network operations, reports, tools, and admin. Now a lot of people get confused, well, I don't know where to find this and I can't find that and I can never remember where to go. The way that I remember where to find stuff in BNI Connect, so network is going to be all the social media components, really interacting with the larger network that is BNI. It's the groups and the connections, testimonials, it's your picture gallery. That is the place to go and do that type of thing. Operations and reports are the places that you're going to go to most of the time. Operations is the day-to-day management of your chapter and the members in your chapter. Operations is the day-to-day management. It's also where you go to do any data input. Reports, on the other hand, are read-only. You'll only ever get info back out of reports. You can't put any information into reports. So we talk about the POMS report, for example, all the time. Well, if you want to do the data entry for the POMS report, you have to go to operations. Input, operations, reports, read-only. If you want to go and look at the summaries and choose different query dates and find out the top giver, then you would go to the reports for that. All right, tools and admin we're really not going to cover today. Admin is pretty much permissions, having to do with assignments and permissions. Most people don't have access to that. Tools are special functions like editing the website, and I have that on a different webinar as well a little bit later in the month. All right, so let's take a look under the operations menu. Again, most of the time you're going to be spending under operations or reports. So let's go to operations and take a look at what's under there. Oh, Kay has a quick question. How do I put in thank you for closed business when the sale was free? So when there was actually no business? I mean, if you want to put in, my recommendation for that would be to probably put in a token $1 amount or something along those lines just so it was submitted. But otherwise, I mean, there was no business generated, so you wouldn't be putting a $0 slip in for that. Does that make sense, Kay? Yeah, I'd recommend just putting a token $1 in. All right, so let's take a look at this operations menu. So again, the operations is the day-to-day management. We can manage visitors, we can manage the meeting and all the different things about the meeting. We can manage memberships. We can manage goals for the chapter. We can work with the mentoring program. We have a couple of options for things to do with email. And then there's a news function. Now, unless you want to be here for the next 2.5 hours, 3 hours, I'm not going to cover everything on here today. I'm going to cover some of the basics, but if you have specific questions about other things with whatever time is left at the end, just let me know and we can take a look at those individual things. So let's take a look at some of the major things here. So the first thing, I'm going to kind of work my way upwards here, but I'm going to start with this create email. And one of the reasons for that is probably one of the most common things that all leadership teams are going to do is they need to get in touch with their chapter. This is the way to do that. If you go to create email and go to email my chapter, what this will do is give you the most recent distribution list for your chapter. So I know, again, before BNI Connect, if I needed to get an email out to my chapter, I would always go to my sent items or go to my folder that had all my BNI emails in it. I'd find what I thought was the latest email to the group and just hit reply all. And inevitably it would go to some of the wrong people, people that were no longer in the chapter or people that, hadn't joined yet, weren't in that list. So this always gives you the most up-to-date list. You just copy it, start a new email, and paste it into the BCC line, please. Everybody, please paste that into the BCC line. That will cut down on all of the reply all responses. It'll also make sure that if somebody does forward it, that all of these business email addresses don't get out there in the open. But again, just copy and paste it into your own program. Now, some people try to use the inbox up here. Now the inbox up here, just keep in mind that that is an internal messaging system. It is an internal messaging system. That means that if you send an email through that system, people may not be notified about it. So unless they've turned the notifications on, a lot of times those emails may just sit there unread for a very long period of time until somebody logs into BNI Connect and goes looking for those messages. So my recommendation to you is to please use the email my chapter, and then you can send a message out that way. Now, another useful tool in here is the visitor invitation. I'm not going to go too far into this one, but very quickly it allows you to send out a custom invite when you're doing a, let's say members need to invite people to the chapter. You just need to put in somebody's name, John Smith, their company name, their email address. I'm going to send this to myself, and a personal message, which will be the first paragraph of the email that's being sent. This is a test message. And I click send. It'll take that, it'll put it into a nice visitor invitation, and I should get that in 2, 1. And I forgot that I'm testing the new visitor invitation out. This one isn't official yet, but this is what the newer one is going to look like. Let me send a different one. I apologize for that. You guys just got a sneak peek. So let me do this again real quick. And send that. And again, I should get that one in 3, 2, 1, and here it is. So this is what the current email invitation looks like. It has a nice graphic up here at the top. Dear John, it has the first paragraph. It automatically puts in the address and your chapter and invites that visitor to the meeting. And if they reply to it, they can RSVP with you. We are going to be getting a link put in here soon that allows the person to directly register for the upcoming meeting. So Eric does ask, will that automatically put them in the system as a visitor? And at this time, it does not. Again, hopefully in the very next release, we will have a link in there that allows them to register themselves to actually attend the meeting. So that is coming soon. All right, Eric, hopefully that answers your question. In the meantime, though, what you can do is after somebody has RSVP'd and said, yes, I'd like to attend, now let's move into the visitor management piece a little bit and look at manage visitors. And again, here I'm going to switch back over to Antarctica because, again, I am an active member, so I don't want to freak my chapter out here. So let's say that I invited John to the meeting and John says, yes, I would like to attend. Now I can come in and register the prospective visitor before a meeting. And if you've ever filled out a form before, then you pretty much know how to do this. You just choose their profession and specialty from the list. You can put the date that they're going to be visiting, and you'll notice that it only allows you to choose future dates and only the day of your meeting. So let's say that John Smith's going to be coming to the meeting on the 13th. I can put in his information. 1 Here Street, the phone number, and email address. And I'm going to put my own email address in here and submit this. Now, registering a visitor has some real advantages. The first of which is that that visitor will get a confirmation email saying you are now registered to visit this chapter. So it says, hi, John, you are confirmed to visit the BNI Burr chapter up in Antarctica. Please plan to be there. With this invitation and this registration, more visitors are showing up to the meeting because now they know they're expected to come to the meeting. The other added bonus about this is that it will also notify you. So I happen to be on the leadership team up in Antarctica, and I got a notification saying that John Smith is confirmed to visit the BNI Burr chapter. So now as a leadership team, the president, the vice president, secretary, treasurer, all of the visitor hosts, and the director consultant got notified that they are going to be having a visitor that week. That allows me to be prepared for the visitor when they're coming. And what's even better about that is that once your members start registering their own visitors this way, after the meeting, your visitor host or secretary, treasurer, whoever's recording the visitors, it makes their job a lot easier because all they have to do now is go to manage registered visitors and mark attendance. So Eric says, Who should be designated to oversee the visitors' entries in BNI Connect? Generally speaking, that's a visitor host or the secretary treasurer. That's usually who ends up doing that portion of it. But again, every region does things slightly differently, so you may want to check with your director consultant, your executive director on that. And yes, most visitor hosts have access to all of those things under Manage Visitors. So if I go back to operations here, I mean, everybody in the chapter has access to operations. Most members, even if they're not on the leadership team, almost everybody has access to register a prospective visitor. So everybody should be able to register their own visitors before a meeting. And I highly recommend that you get your chapter in the habit of doing that. Only visitor hosts, however, will have the rest of these options, and leadership teams will have the rest of these options. All right. And Kay, when will we have access to that new email? I don't know. That's still in the design phase, that new email layout and template and format. So there's still some kinks to work out with that particular one. So they are working on it. But I don't have a date for that one. I'm sorry. All right. So after the meeting, though, we can go to Manage Registered Visitors. So this is what your visitor host should be doing after every meeting, or your secretary treasurer. They need to go in, and the first thing they should do is, well, they'll know if a visitor was pre-registered, but they can always search against the pre-registered visitors. So let's say our meeting went by, and Adam was registered to attend the meeting. I can go in and let's say he never showed up to the meeting. I can go in and remove this registration so I can keep the database clean. I can always delete this. Or let's say that Bob Jones, let's say that he did come to last week's meeting. I can then just go in and edit this. And rather than have to type everything else out, all I have to do is put a check mark in the box that said visitor attended. Once I do that, it will then also ask me if I want to add this visitor to the POMS report. So what that does is it will give the person that invited them credit. It'll give them a 1 in their visitor column in the POMS report. However, you only want to do that the first time the visitor comes to the meeting. And it has to be an eligible visitor. The reason that you want to be careful with this is that it will affect your traffic light scores. So the traffic light scores for visitor conversion ratio are simply number of visitors in the POMS report divided by the number of new members that you've had over that period of time. So if you're putting the same visitor into the POMS report 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you are really lowering your conversion ratio. So Laura says, what if I took a visitor to a cross-chapter meeting? Will this show up on my POMS? So no, it won't. You won't get POMS credit for bringing somebody to a different chapter. That would have the effect, unfortunately, of lowering the conversion rate in your chapter for a visitor that showed up in another chapter. Does that make sense, Laura? Right, so you only get the POMS credit for visitors in your own chapter. All right, so again, if I'm just checking them as attended, I just have to verify a couple of things here, make sure that all the information is correct. I can choose whether or not to send them the follow-up email, and then click Submit. And now that visitor will be taken out of the prospective visitors and put into the POMS report and put into our visitor list. If somebody doesn't show up here, I can always choose Add a Visitor up here. And this just allows me to add a visitor that attended the meeting that hadn't pre-registered. Marilyn says, when entering visitors that are not qualified to become a member or are an employee of a current member, are they entered? My recommendation is yes, you should be adding everybody as a visitor into the system. That keeps track of them. You can use that visitor database later to invite them to more meetings or invite them to business after hours events or socials or whatever. But the one thing that you don't want to do is if they are ineligible or if it's their second visit or something like that, you want to make sure you uncheck add visitor to POM. So they'll still go to the database, but it won't add them to the POMS report and it won't lower your conversion ratio. Does that make sense, Marilyn? Ken says, can we see the visitor? Thank you. Sure, this is the thank you note. It says, hi Bob, thank you for recently visiting the BNI Burr chapter on the 23rd of March. Some of the benefits of joining. Please visit BNI for more information. Again, this may look slightly different, may have slightly different wording in your particular region, but this is the default copy of it. All right, does that help, Ken? All right. Now, once you start building your visitor database, that's a great thing to have for the future because then, again, you can, that information follows them all the way through if they ever become a member. So even less typing when you have to put an application in. It also means, again, that you can market them. We have reports that I'll show you in a couple of minutes that show all of that information as well. All right, so that's all I'm going to cover on visitors today unless anybody has any specific questions about it. But the next step of this is let's look at some of the meeting management things. And the most important thing on here is that usually the vice president or the data entry person, every week after the meeting, they need to go back to their office and put in the POMS report. Now, for those of you that are using the online slips, and I highly recommend that you encourage your chapter to use the online slips. For those of you that are all digital using the online slips, this process will take you about 3.5 minutes a week, if that long. For those of you that are still using paper slips in your chapter meetings, this process will take you anywhere between 15 minutes and an hour and a half, depending on how big your chapter is. So that being said, again, I highly recommend that you use the online slips process because it will fill out all the information in the POMS report for you. So here's how to enter a POMS report. So you come back from the meeting, you go to Operations, and then go to Meeting Management, and click on Enter POMS. Now the first thing it's going to do when you go to Enter POMS, it is going to ask you to confirm the credit for all of the visitors that have been entered since the last time you entered a POMS report. So you'll notice here that I have 3 visitors that have been entered, including the one that I just entered a few seconds ago. So Bob Jones here. It's telling me that Becky is going to be given credit for the visitor. Jeremy Walsh is the one that did the data entry and the date that they visited. This is also the POMS report that the credit will be given to. Now, a lot of times we're entering visitors maybe after the POMS report has been submitted or we're catching up on paperwork. So even if it's in the past, it'll go back and it'll update that past report. So it's asking me to make a decision. Do I want to add that person to the POMS? Yes or no. If that POMS was already entered, it will give you a link so you can always click that and go and review that previous POMS report to make sure that, for example, the visitor wasn't already given credit. So sometimes the visitor will be given manual credit. We don't want to give double credit for it. So let's say Bob Jones here. Yes, I would like to add that person to the POMS report. Once I have made all of my decisions, it will then automatically bring me to the next screen. And I choose the date that I want to enter the POMS report for. So let's say I want to enter the POMS report for last week's meeting. I'm a couple of days behind here, so let's say the 30th of March, and I click Enter. This essentially is now the POMS report, and it is really nothing more than a giant spreadsheet that we're going to enter all of our information into. So if you happen to have been using the online slips, all of the numbers in here will essentially be filled out for you. All you have to do is take the attendance for that meeting and submit the PALMS report. If you're using paper slips, the next step is to sort all those paper slips out into a bunch of different piles, count them, and put them into the various fields. All right, so now let's take a look before I go too far into this. Eric had a couple of questions, comments. Can you alphabetize the list according to both first and last names? It's not properly alphabetized. So you can click any of the either of these headers and sort them by first name or last name. But I think what you're referring to is that like if I sort by last name here, I think what you had mentioned was, at least on the first sort, that like some of the Smiths weren't entered correctly, possibly. So, Eric, do you know what it could be? It could be that there's a hidden like space or a hidden character in that person's name that's causing it to sort out of order. For example, if B. Smith, if he has space B. Smith in his name, that could force it to sort above. And it may be a space that you can't see. But I'll tell you what, Eric, just so I don't take up time troubleshooting that one specific thing because it seems to be working otherwise, can you do me a favor and shoot me an email? Support@bniconnect.com, support@bniconnect.com, and I'd be happy to troubleshoot you that particular thing with you offline. All right? So Ken said on the visitor screen, what was that draft? So that means that that was just a link to the PALMS report if there was a PALMS report already entered. So let me go back to that and I'll show you. So if I go back to operations, and I go to meeting management and I go to enter a PALMS report. If PALMS reports are there, if they exist, so there is a draft PALMS report that exists for the meeting on March 2nd. Now, normally these will say completed because you guys are going to stay on top of doing your PALMS reports every week. This is Antarctica, and unfortunately I don't have a very reliable vice president up there, so we're a little bit behind on our PALMS reports. Okay, but I'll tell you what, let me show you guys something here because I'm going to go to my chapter. Now, as I mentioned before, my chapter is completely digital at this point. So we're doing all of our, so you see here, here's a chapter that has visitors that were entered on various meetings. And you can see the link here is completed because all of those PALMS reports have been entered. All right, but I'm going to go to my chapter here. All right, and let's say that I was going to enter my PALMS report for my chapter for last Thursday's meeting. Because we're all digital, you can see that all of the information has already been entered into the PALMS report because it's automatically keeping track of all of the online slips. So again, if you're just using paper, all you got to do is to, you have a referral from, Chris to Claudia. You have to go in and you put in one referral given for Chris and one referral received for Claudia. And you have to add up the thank you for closed business, and you do need to scroll over for the CEUs. So keep that in mind that you do have to scroll over for the CEUs. And again, P stands for present, absent, late, medical, and substitute. For those of you that are using the online slips, there is also a slips audit report button up at the top. That allows you to see and verify all of that online activity that happens throughout the week. You'll notice that there are some things that are in bold, and those things that are in bold are cross-chapter activity. So I can see that, Ken had a one-to-one with Marissa in the producers chapter. Thank you for closed business is always anonymous on the receiving side. You can only see who generated the money. Okay, and once you're done, all you have to do is click Submit PALMS. Now, I'm not going to do that for my real live personal chapter, but all you need to do is submit it when you're sure everything is all set. The other buttons here, you'll notice there's one that says mark as holiday. So if your chapter doesn't meet on a particular week, let's say that you have a snowstorm or it's a holiday, Thanksgiving. I meet on Thursdays. My chapter meets on Thursdays. Thanksgiving always falls on a Thursday. A lot of times we don't have a meeting Thanksgiving week. So that means that what you have to do, you still have to enter the POMS report, but you have to just go in and click Mark as Holiday. That will basically submit an empty report, but it'll also take it out of the, per week statistic calculations and things like that. It'll also push all of the online slips to next week's meeting, which is why it's really important to do that on time so that the online slips get pushed right away to the next meeting. Save as draft means that you just want to go in and hold off where you are. Let's say that you're counting slips and you get an important call. Make sure that you click Save as Draft. That will allow you to finish it later. Or if you completely mess everything up and you need to start all over again, you can always click Discard POMS, and that will allow you to start over again. All right, so there's also under Meeting Management, View POMS Summary. This will allow you to look at any single report going back in history. So you aren't just limited to your term. You can go back years in time. Let's say that somebody comes to you and says, oh yeah, that I had that error on my POMS report. You should be able to go back and fix that by clicking on View POMS. You can, again, go back as far as you want to. If you click on the word completed or draft or holiday, whatever it might be, that will take you to that particular POMS report, which you could then unlock it, which will allow you to edit it and resubmit it. All right, Ken says, if you discard the POMS report, will it repopulate what was entered by the members? Yes, it will repopulate everything that was entered by the members using online slips. It will not repopulate anything that you had started doing manually or the attendance. So it will just repopulate all of the online slips. And yes, Ken, for entering thank you for closed business to former members, you would use the BNI line. Eric says, who is entering the CEUs? The members should be entering their own CEUs by submitting slips for those. Ruth says, who is BNI and visitor in the POM? So again, yeah, BNI is going to be, really it's alumni and your region. So let's say your director consultant had a referral for you or something like that. That would be a referral received from BNI. And visitor, we usually don't track any referrals or anything or one-to-ones with visitors, but we do track thank you for closed business from visitors. So does that answer your question, Ruth? Excellent. All right, and that's the POMS report. So let's go back to the operations menu and take a look at, there's just two more things that I'm going to show you under the operations menu. The first of which under meeting management, we do have the view edit speakers. And it's a great idea to put your speaker rotation into BNI Connect. And the reason for that is twofold. The first of which is it essentially schedules a reminder to be sent to them. Have you ever had somebody show up to your chapter meeting that was supposed to be speaking that week that completely and totally forgot? This will send 2 reminders to them 6 days before they're speaking and 2 days before they're speaking, so they should remember that they are speaking that week. The second thing it does is it does put it up on the chapter website, so just a little bit of extra visibility for the next month's worth of upcoming speakers. So to see your speakers or to assign your speakers, just choose the enter from date. You can put in any date range you want to, and I can see all the people that had been scheduled. I can also see all of the upcoming speakers as well. So I can see that I'm actually scheduled to speak on the 14th, so I'll be speaking in a couple of weeks if anybody wants to come and visit my chapter. To assign another person to speak, just click on Assign Speaker. Choose the date that they'll be speaking, and choose them from the drop-down list. You may see a couple of people that you don't recognize on this list. For example, Elise Wilson. Everybody will have Elise Wilson on their list. Elise Wilson is our National Director for BNI in the United States. So this has our national team, just in case they ever come to visit your chapter. It also has all of your director consultants and executive director for your region as well. Now, it may seem silly that Elise Wilson is in this list, but in a lot of smaller countries, the national director is actively visiting chapters and working with chapters on a one-to-one basis. You know, some countries that may only have a couple of chapters as they're continuing to build and grow. So that's why it's in there for their convenience, even though it may not make as much sense in a very large country like the United States or Canada or the UK or something like that. Just put in their topic, and once you click submit, they will be scheduled for that week's meeting. Now, I don't recommend putting any more than 6 or 8 weeks in. One thing to note is that you can't shift people around. So you can delete somebody and replace them with somebody else, but you can't say, oh, well, I just need to shift everybody back a week. That's somewhat intentional. Yes, it would be very convenient, but you try to think of it from your members' standpoint as well. For example, I'm speaking on the 14th. I've had that in my calendar now for the last 6 weeks. I'm preparing for it. I'm basing travel plans around when I'm speaking in my chapter. If my secretary stands up next week and says, oh, well, John can't speak this week, so we just moved everybody up a week. Well, now I got to go back to my calendar. If I even heard them say that or remember to do that later, it's better to just inconvenience one person than it is to inconvenience 6 weeks or 12 people by trying to shift everything. Just my recommendation. All right, so that's the speaker rotation. And then finally, the last thing is we do have a goals program. I'm going to be doing that webinar tomorrow, so I'm not going to go into that today, but if you'd like to learn how to set your chapter goals, please join us tomorrow. But the mentoring program is very similar to the speaker rotation in that you can assign a mentor and a mentee. All you need to do is choose when you'd like them to start receiving the emails, and it will send them a weekly email coaching them through the mentoring process, letting them know that, hey, this is week 1 of the mentoring program. You should be getting together for a one-to-one, and here's what you should be talking about. Week 2, it sends them another email. Hey, have you scheduled your member success program yet? And so on and so forth, coaching them through that 7 or 8 week process. All right, manage news is a special function. I'm not going to cover that in today's webinar, but do we have any questions on the operations side of things before we take the last 10 to 15 minutes to go through some of the reports that are in BNI Connect? I know we have some seasoned members on the call with us today as well, Steve and Swati and some other people. If you have anything that you'd like me to mention to them, just let me know and I will put that out there as well. If not, I'm going to move on to the reports. All right, so let's take a look at reports. So reports, there are a ton of reports. There's like 20 some odd reports here that are available in BNI Connect at the chapter level. I am not going to go through all of them. I do recommend, however, that at your convenience, just go through and click on the reports and take a look at them. You can't break anything in reports. As I mentioned before, they're all read only, so you're just looking at the data in the system. You're not entering anything. So just go through, click through them. If you don't understand what a report's all about, by the way, for example, traffic lights. There is a traffic lights report in here. In front of just about every function in BNI Connect, there's a little question mark. If you click on that little question mark, that will take you over to the help document for that particular thing. So it shows you how to get into the function, what it's all about, how the scoring is done, an explanation of what it all is. It's also very useful for things like an education moment. So if you need to teach your chapter about something, you can also use the help articles for that as well. But anyway, looking at some of the reports, again, it's going to look like I'm going through all of them, but I'm not going to go through every single one. Just about 7 or 8 of the ones that I really love. All right, so this first one, the member training report. That's a fairly obvious report. You just pick a date range. By default, it's going to give you 6 months, but you can choose any date range you want to. And you can see what training people have attended. That's really good for membership committees when you're doing reviews for people, or if you need to push people to go to a particular training. But what I find this really helpful for, especially as secretary treasurers, as you're scheduling the speaker rotation, it is important to know that you're not supposed to schedule somebody for a feature presentation, a 10-minute presentation, unless they've taken a member success program. So if you want to find out who hasn't taken the member success program, choose this option, show never attended. It's going to ignore the dates, but I can then, let's say, go to the member success program and click go. And as a leadership team, I'll be able to then know which people I need to encourage to take the member success program. So these are all fairly new members in my chapter. I know which ones I need to encourage to go take the member success program. It also lets me know that I can't schedule them for a 10-minute presentation yet. So that's the member training report, that special option in the member training report. All right, another one of the bread and butter reports here is the chapter roster report. Now this one is fairly obvious. Again, it's going to show you, well, your roster in your chapter. So it's going to list all of your members. But more importantly on this one is at the top of the report. So again, bottom of the report, it has all the members and what their categories are and their phone number if you want to get in touch with them. But at the top of the list, it'll show all of the assignments. And this one, especially in the beginning of the term, is really, really important because as your visitor hosts, for example, come to you and say, oh, well, I couldn't enter the visitor, I don't have that option. Well, check to make sure that they are actually listed as a visitor host. If they are not listed here, they do not have the proper permissions or the proper assignments. Just contact your regional office. They can definitely help you out with that. If you need to get in touch with your director consultant, you can also find their contact information here if you need to get in touch with them. Now, the bottom part, again, it's going to have their name, company name, and their classification, their phone number. I also like to pay a lot of attention to this, the last 90 days of their membership. You want to kind of keep an eye out, especially for people that don't have any one-to-one activity. So if they're listing, let's say, zeros here in their activity, you may want to speak with them. They might not be participating fully, or maybe something's wrong that you can help them with. So I really like to keep an eye on that 90 days of activity. You know, people that haven't been able to give or receive a referral or have one-to-ones, those are kind of red flags for maybe someone should sit down with them and see if everything's okay. For you secretary treasurers and people on the membership committee, the membership dues report is going to be the report that you turn to a lot. It's going to, again, just show your roster here. It also shows you when everybody is due. Now, something to keep in mind, the people that are in bold here at the top of the list, those are people that are due for renewal in the next 2 months. They should be well underway in the process of filing their renewal. The membership committee should already have been reviewing them for approval. The ones that you really want to look at is you want to look 6 months down the line. So if you look at the people that are due in October and in November and December, these are really the people that you want to pay close attention to, because those are people that you want to make sure that they're going to renew in 6 months. And 6 months is enough time to turn things around. So if any of these members are struggling, you want to make sure that they're doing okay. And 6 months, they can still learn how to pass better referrals or learn how to do better one-to-ones and be able to get more value out of their membership. At the bottom of this report, we'll also show you new members that have just joined, show you members that are late in the renewal process, and anybody that has dropped in the past 30 days as well. All right, the meeting notes report. Again, one of my favorite reports here. This is going to be such a really simple, silly report, but it has a big impact. So if you look at this report, all it really is the member's name and their company name. What it was designed for is for you to be able to print it out and have a place to keep notes for when people are giving their presentations at the meeting. This is a great way to help your members give better and more referrals. Again, this is a way to help them give more referrals. You know, we have a chapter of almost 50 people, so by the time we're going through the list and halfway through, we can't really remember everything that everybody said, so the best way to do that is to write that down. Now, a lot of people may say there's not enough room to write down here. You know what? The best thing to do, export this. You'll have an option on almost all the reports that says export without headers. That means it's just going to export the data and not all of this stuff at the top. And once you then have it in Excel, now you can do better stuff with it. Now I can say, let's say that I want to give it a fancy color scheme, so I can format this and give it a fancy color scheme. Let's say I want the notes field to be bigger. I can take that and make it bigger, and then resize all this stuff. I can sort it by first name instead of by last name. So it's a great way to be able to really play with this report and make it your own. Or if you want to keep notes electronically, now you have the Excel file to do that. One little power tip is we used to pass a copy of this around the room and ask everybody to fill out their specific referral. Then we would collect it and email it back out to the group, so we had a hard copy of what everybody asked for on a weekly basis. Eric has a question. Can you export a CSV instead of an Excel file? Makes it really tough for Mac users not to be able to do this. Actually, it does export as an XML file, masked as an XLS, which should work with most programs out there. So yeah, it may not be working with yours. So Eric, if you want to shoot an email to me, there's a couple of kind of tricks that I can give you. A lot of times with numbers, all you have to do is to rename the file. For some reason, in some versions of Safari, this will come down actually without an extension on it. So like in my downloads, for example, it may come without an XLS at the end of it. It just comes down as a raw file. So a lot of times with Macs, you have to go in and actually put the XLS at the end of it, and then Numbers will open it up. So try that out. If not, shoot me an email and we can troubleshoot it separately. All right. Summary Palms report, again, a bread and butter report. The trick with this report, again, aside from the obvious, is that it will automatically choose the 6-month period, previous rolling 6 months. But you can change this. So if you want to go back and look at the last 10 years worth of data, you can do that. Another little hidden gem about this report is that you can show the dropped member names. Now, the totals will always be accurate. We'll include everybody that's ever been a member of the chapter. But if you show their names, essentially this is like looking back in history, because I can see anybody that has ever been a member of the chapter. Now, what this is really helpful for, go back and look at some of the people that are no longer in the chapter. Maybe invite them back to a future meeting, especially the top producers that were, really, especially big in thank you for closed business. They were generating a lot of money for the chapter. Why not invite them back to another meeting? All right, skipping down a couple down the list, we have the Personal Palms report. By the way, this is the same report that's on the home screen, that personal participation report, except that you can run this report for anybody in your chapter for any time period you'd like to. So this is really helpful, again, when you're reviewing their membership, when they're up for renewal, but also for troubleshooting purposes. There's a couple of VP reports, the VP report and the cumulative VP report. Take a look at those. For the Secretary Treasurers out there, a lot of times one of the dreaded things is chasing your member down for their bio. If they fill out their bio in BNI Connect, then you can use the member details report and get their bio right from here as opposed to having to chase them down with that piece of paper. Notice this is the exact same bio that you would have them fill out before their feature presentation. And of course, we have visitor reports where you can go in and see the visitors to your chapter over any period of time that you'd like to. Very helpful for going back and maybe inviting them to a networking event, or inviting them to come back for another visitor day or something like that. And you also have the visitor registration report. So all of those visitors that pre-registered for a meeting, they will all be listed here as well. So you can see who's registered for upcoming meetings. All right, and on that note, we are at the top of the hour, so I do want to open this up to questions in just a second. I'm going to show you guys one last trick. As you're going through these reports, you're finding all of these reports that are your favorites. You can make your own personal shortcut list. So if I go back to the home screen and I'm back on my BNI business page, on here on the left-hand side, you notice you have a couple of things. Most people will see just my business, my network, and chapter. My network has some other cool little functions here, like your regional event calendar, as well as documents that your region may have shared with you. But below that is the chapter list. And what this is this is your personal shortcut list. So as you're finding your favorite functions, click Configure. The stuff on the left is your personal list. The stuff on the right is everything else that you have access to. Now you can just put everything in your personal list if you'd like to, or you can just put the stuff that you want in there. And you can always take the things that are your favorites and move them around in the list. So let's say this meeting notes report, I want that to be at the top of my list. I can drag and drop it and put it up there. I can save that and close out, and now my list will refresh. Now instead of going to reports, chapter, meeting notes report, I can just go to meeting notes report right here and open it up right away. So it saves a couple of clicks there. All right, so that being said, we are at the top of the hour. Again, what I'd like to do is to open this up to any and all questions. The only silly question is the unasked question. So I'm happy to answer any questions at all about BNI Connect. While you're thinking of any questions, just a reminder, this is being recorded. You will be able to find this recording on the support site. To get to the support site, click on this big question mark up here in the upper right-hand corner. So again, the little question marks will take you to a help document just on that one specific function. The big one will take you to the full support site. And on the support site, the very first thing you'll see is our list of upcoming webinars. A good referral for me is if you found that this was helpful, if you thought this was a good format, got good information from it, please let other people know about these webinars. We have a whole series of webinars coming up. Tomorrow we're going to do another leadership team webinar with the goals for leadership teams right here. And then we're going to start with our member series. We have completing your profile on Wednesday, giving and tracking referrals on Thursday, and connecting with other members. So we go through the whole series of these, and we'll do the whole series again in May. All right, let's see what we have. We have a question here from Swati. For new members who may get overwhelmed by the plethora of tools, which one are your two favorite tools a new member should start with? My two favorite tools are the online slips. Definitely get going with the online slips right away and make sure that your profile is filled out. Those are my top two things for new members. Make sure you fill out your profile and make sure that you are using the online slips, which are the first two member webinars that I recommend attending as well. Does that make sense? Does that help, Swati? And I go into more detail about why the online slips are possibly the most important thing that you can do in your membership, because you can track your history of who you're passing referrals to and things like that. How many CEUs, Kay says, for this webinar? So today's webinar, what you want to do is go to the home page, click on Submit a CEU Slip, and today would be a BNI webinar. So the second option down is what I usually tell people, 1 for 1 credit, and click submit. Now, if yours doesn't list BNI webinar, basically, I mean, this is roughly the number of hours for each of those activities. You know, it takes about an hour to listen to a BNI CD. Most of those are about 50, 55 minutes long. Podcasts are about 10 to 12 minutes apiece, so 5 of them would be about an hour. That's why you get 1 credit for those. You know, an advanced training is usually about 4 hours. A leadership team training is about 3 hours. So that's the reason why we have all of those in there. So just choose the correct one, the appropriate one, and submit a 1 for that. All right. Does that answer your question, Kay? Helen says, I don't see all the classes people have attended in the past. Do we just go back in and backdate? So the place that you would see them is on their profile or in that training report. If they're not listed there, you don't have access to enter those. So what you'd have to do is to talk with your director consultant. The director consultant of your regional office, they would be the ones that would have to enter those trainings in to make sure that everybody's profile and history gets updated correctly. Okay? By the way, if you look on the handouts portion of this webinar software, I did upload a manual. It's called the BNI Connect Training Manual. Everything that I covered today is available as a help document, and it is part of that BNI Connect Training Manual. Feel free to download that right here from the GoToWebinar software before we're finished. If for some reason you missed that, or if you're listening to the recording in the future, then please go ahead and email me, support@bniconnect.com, and say, I'd like a copy of the BNI Connect training manual that you mentioned in the webinar. We'll be happy to send that along to you. Okay? All right. Do we have any more questions? Any other questions whatsoever about anything to do with BNI Connect? I am absolutely happy to answer those questions now. All right. If not, I look forward to seeing some of you guys tomorrow, I hope, in our BNI Connect chapter goals presentation. And on that note, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of the week and happy connecting.